Hi, and welcome to episode 428 of Control Talk. Now, your smart buildings videocast and podcast, the week ending September 17th, 2023. My name is Eric Stromquist, and I am so glad you're here. Got a really good show coming up. One of the great consulting engineers in our industry is coming on the show, so we're going to chop it up with him. But before we get to that, a quick word from this week's sponsor. Hey, are you a systems integrator or controls company that's being held back by not having enough good technical people on staff? One of the problems that we share in building automation controls today is that we have lots of work, lots of potential jobs to quote, and we have really, really good people, but we have more jobs, more potential than we have people to do the jobs, which basically means we're walking away from business. And although we're trying to attract, hire, and train more techs, it's just not happening fast enough. Our sponsor this week can help. Innovative Control Tech Solutions, ICT, can help you take on more jobs and make more money. ICT has over 90 skilled engineers ready to step in and help get the job done. Whether it's taking off projects, working up quotes, doing submittals, doing control drawings, which can be really time consuming, programming jobs, or troubleshooting and even monitoring projects, they can help with it all. With ICT helping out your business with their experienced staff, you can take on more projects without any extra worries while still maintaining impressive customer service standards, and all at a very affordable price. It's pretty simple, really. The more work you quote, the more work you'll get. And with ICT doing a lot of the labor-intensive things, you'll be surprised at just how competitive you can be using ICT. So click on the link in the show notes to schedule a free consultation. And for a limited time, new customers can get a 10% discount on their first job. So stop walking away from business and start getting more jobs working with ICT. Hey, if you'd like to sponsor a Control Talk Now show, just click on the link in the show notes and we'll set you up. If you've got the product, I got the platform. All right, man, Eric Stromquist. I am here with an old friend who I've known for a while. Fortunately for me, he's just one of the all-time great guys in our industry. His name is Donny Walker. He is, when I think of an enlightened engineer, one that is keeping up with the changes. If I had to put a picture in the dictionary, it'd be of Donny. Donny's a partner at Newcomb and Boyd, one of the all-time great engineering firms on the planet. Donny, man, thanks for taking some time to speak with us.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Great to be on and great to see you again and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. All right, first of all, man, it's been a bit since we spoke. Tell me about you, man. Give me some updates on you, Newcomb and Boyd. Anything new on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. So our Intelligent Buildings group here has grown to about 12 folks, all dedicated to designing smart connected buildings, and in addition to the other technology groups that we have. And it's been really great to see how the industry has matured to the point to where there's sophistication amongst the client base and owners and the things that they're asking for and what we're being able to deliver to the market. We started this about 15 years ago. Max and I started the Intelligent Buildings group as a little side gig, and really because we had an interest in working in smart buildings. Two-prong. One, it was fun to do, and then two, we saw that the controls industry, as it got more complex, was not headed in a good direction from a design or an installation perspective. And so we said, if we're going to get this right, we've got to have good controls and good design on those controls. And it's grown way beyond what we expected.
Well, what a timely vision, if you will. Because 15 years ago, I think we were just starting to see some of the new technology really shake loose. And in the last 15 years, it's changed so much. Walk us through some of the changes you've seen since then.
Yeah. Back then, the thought of using a Niagara system was pretty new. We had a couple of clients that had pioneered on the R2 and said, hey, I think this new AX is going to really give us a lot of capabilities. And we went from that to these large national and global clients that have standardized on that approach and going into where we are today with some really innovative products. And what really amazes me, though, is what we didn't see coming was the avalanche of data. should have seen that coming. But at that point, we were thinking more about getting things connected from a convenience standpoint, that if I get it connected, I can talk to it, and remote diagnostics and things like that, but really not understanding the level of data, whether it's through occupancy and people tracking, or the HVAC and the FDD, through the energy metrics and all the sustainability metrics and carbon accounting and all these things that just really didn't even enter the picture back then, that are becoming table stakes for a lot of the large enterprises.
Yeah, you got to have that now, don't you? You've got to be so concerned with your brand and the younger people wanting to know what you're doing in terms of being a good citizen, sustainability wise. And then the government's coming up with, in a lot of states, with a lot of requirements that weren't around before.
They are. We've seen most of the major metro areas have at least initiated policy around capturing the data and are beginning to benchmark. And right on the heels of benchmarking is, you're too high. Yeah. You have to reduce. It's that legislation is coming.
Oh, it is for sure. And I love your team, man. Of course, Max, in addition to being a really cool guy, is my favorite photographer, right up there with Henry Carter, Barson, and some of these others. So is Max doing okay?
He's doing great. Yeah, he's out of Blueprint right now.
Okay, cool. We have to tell him. And then, of course, you got Paul Maxima, too, who comes from the industrial side. So are you guys doing a lot of industrial type stuff as well?
Not a lot of industrial as in manufacturing. There's a little bit that we're doing to support some of our clients that have a large office environment and some light manufacturing. But that expertise also helps us a lot with evaluating PLC versus DDC in central plants, and having some of that PLC experienced in the electrical monitoring. And really what Paul brings to the group is that owner's perspective, that you can sit around and hash out, I think this is what someone is going to want. But when you've got someone that's been on the other end buying it and saying, this is what I wanted to hear, this is what I was looking for, it's really good to have that owner's perspective.
No, I know. And he was with one of the big three car manufacturers. And it's interesting because our friend Scott Cochran, I think, went in and was calling on Paul, and they were trying to, I think that the story goes, and correct me if I'm wrong, they wanted to know how much it cost to energy they use and whatnot to manufacture a car. And all these industrial people were coming in going, yeah, we can do this for $700,000-$800,000. We can put these systems in and get that data. Scott comes in with the Jace, and I think it was a couple $1,000s, and they couldn't believe it. I think between Paul and Scott, we really opened up those possibilities for the manufacturing people in terms of gathering data in a very cost-effective way.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. And so now it's interesting because, again, we started with, we just get a system in and wow, it's cool. We can get them to talk, to, all right, now we need to figure out how to gather the data in cost-effective ways, because it'd be cool to be able to know what's what. And we've gone through all sort of iterations with that in terms of how do you get the data out of the system. And maybe talk a bit about that, because I know you've been very involved, for example, with Haystack Connect, and every step of the way you've been front and center. So talk about getting the data out of a system and the challenges with that, and how you guys help customers come to grips with that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you look at bringing data from a lot of disparate systems and being able to analyze that, there has to be a platform that's doing that data aggregation, the analytics, the advanced visualization tools. And so that's been a lot of what we've helped our clients with, is finding the right platform. Because there's a lot of good ones out there, and it's not that one's better than the other. It's one's better than the other application or what your long-term vision is. And so that's what we've done a lot of. And there's similar challenges with each one, that there's the data access side, but then there's also the data tagging standards. How is that data going to be able to be used in the future by other applications? And that's where we've really seen a lot with the ontologies and Haystack and Brick, and starting to see more with Rec. And I think that we're not on the final evolution of that. I think we will definitely get to the point to where that metadata is more embedded, and then maybe the relational tags have to be added, but the metadata of what it is needs to be more of a standard that comes with every product, so that we get closer and closer to a plug and play application and not have to do so much manual configuration with every setup.
I suspect that's one of the things that you help advise your clients with in terms of when they're looking at a system, is how easy is it to get the data out if we're going to be using the data, right? Because some systems, they have Haystack tagging built into it, right? And others, you got to write your own, which can be an unintended cost if you don't have somebody like you paying attention for them.
Or nowhere to even store that metadata. And so if someone has an older, antiquated system and says they want to standardize on Haystack, say, okay, great. We're going to we're going to migrate your data into something else because
Yeah.
your current systems aren't going to get you there.
Yeah. Donnie, are you seeing, at least from my perspective, it seems like most of the control vendors now are all on the same page in terms of being open protocol, if you will, be able to
That's
talk
right.
BACnet, Modbus, or whatever. They all tend to function pretty much the same way. There are some probably minor exceptions, but I guess when you start looking or advising your clients on, hey, you should go with brand X versus brand Y or whatever, I know you probably pretty much generic, you make sure it meets the specification, but they come to you and say, Donnie, who should I go with?
Right.
What are some other criteria that you have them look at?
So we always discuss the 3 levels of openness. And so you mentioned the protocol level, and that's a standard. Yeah, everybody's on BACnet. We're seeing more and more go to IP. And so that's even easier to get that data from. A lot of times we're able to pull that BACnet IP data directly from the controller to whatever third party application we may be using. But then there's, of course, where can I get it from? And so that distribution side becomes that product, it's open. We can all talk to it. You have one option for buying and one option for support. And that's great with some clients. They have a great relationship with that provider and that serves them well. But we have the conversation of, is that the case for them? And are they looking for something that has more purchase and support options?
Yeah, that's a great point. If you've got a great provider that's just top notch, best top of line, if you will, then it's not an issue. But having that choice is a word that when I talk to people, I always say it's open's really about choices, right? Can you get the product? And even if you have a really great provider, one of the things we talk about, and I don't know whether it's on your radar or not, is, hey, can you get the same training as the people that are installing? Because maybe you evolve, you want your maintenance people to be able to do more of this stuff. And then there's a thing called programming tools. Some of them, we'll give you the software, we'll give you the training, but we're not going to give you the programming tool. But without the programming tool, you really can't do anything. For our listeners out there, especially our owners, this is why having somebody like Donnie on your side and a good consulting engineer, I like to say probably the most important person on your team is a good consulting engineer, because they know where the pitfalls are, and you can decide what you want to decide, but at least go with your eyes open.
And those programming tools are important when we're commissioning a project, because we don't want to just know that in one scenario it can run a functional test. We want to know, is the programming sound? Does it actually do what the sequence of operations said it was supposed to?
Yeah.
So you want to be able to get to the root of that code and be able to evaluate it.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Donnie, when we talk about IP controllers and again, most of our audience is going to know what an IP controller is and why they're important. We also do have a lot of end users that listen to the show. Let's give them a little stable datum, Donnie, and tell them about IP controllers, why they're in vogue now, the pros, and if there are any cons to them.
Sure. Yeah. We were just having this discussion with someone yesterday about when we typically say that we're going to IP controls, what we mean is that our terminal units are going IP, because our network controllers and, for the most part, air handlers have been IP for a decade. And a lot of times the resistance that you get, that I don't want to have to support the IT side of that, it's a moot point. You already do. You're just going to have more ports. And so if you've already solved the IT challenge, you might as well just buy a few more ports on the switch and get all of your devices connected to not have the field bus issues that you have with a lot of the serial communications, the orphan devices, the inability to tell if everything is online or not, and run diagnostics. And then, of course, just that remote connectivity, that IT side of it. Once you realize that you're half in the water anyway, you might as well jump in.
Yeah. And I think it also makes it, when we talk about data and people want more and more data, it seems like those they allow more flow, it seems, right? Than, say, a BACnet trunk or something like that.
But what that's been able to do for us is to open up that conversation around, let's make sure you are dealing with the IT side properly.
Yeah.
If you've got a shadow network of unmanaged, manageable switches, you have a huge vulnerability that's just waiting for trouble. And let's deal with it properly and get you set up for the future, and not just keep it locked away in the cabinet and out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. And Donnie, I suspect that I know a lot of what you guys do is to make sure that your clients are getting systems that are cyber secure, which has somewhat to do with the system, but probably more how it's installed and then the game plan going forward. You guys hold people's hands and walk them through that whole thing, I'm guessing.
That's right. Yeah. So we do everything from the front end design side to say, what network is this going on? What needs to communicate with it? What ports need to be open? How are you securing this type of traffic from this type of traffic? But then what you also just mentioned, there is the device side. And so what we're doing a lot more of is we call it Diff 25 commissioning, but sometimes we call it cyber commissioning, because what you want to do is have someone go in and validate that if you said that you were going to change these passwords, that you changed them.
Yeah.
If you had certain security parameters that a component is capable of, was it initiated? Because a lot of times you have things that are designed pretty advanced, but the guy that's putting it in is trying to get it online and show that it works. And some of those things are, I'll come back to it later. Once it's up and running, sometimes they don't come back to it. So, again, those security features are only as good as what's enabled.
I suspect too that you probably have a referee's whistle someplace, because and I think this trend's changed, but for a long time you had the OT people that the building automation controls came under. You had the IT people, and never the two would talk, right? And when they did, it wasn't always a lot of fun. But are you seeing, or are you having to facilitate getting those groups on the same page, so to speak?
We are. We have some clients that we've helped create an OT group out of their IT. So IT people start to specialize and say, we realize we need a few folks that understand the HVAC systems, that understand that you have different patching and updating requirements, and we can't, change things on your network without letting, because you're going to have device failures and those kind of things. Others have grown more out of the facility side and said, okay, we're going to train some folks to become more IT savvy and be our OT team. But what we're seeing across the board for people that maintain portfolios or campuses and those kind of things is that someone is now taking that ownership. And that's what we didn't see in the past. It was just a ball that was dropped in between the two.
Yeah. And then if something screwed up, there's a lot of finger pointing going on. So what I hear you saying now is the owners have gotten savvy, and somebody has responsibility for that now. So nothing's going to slip through the cracks. Like you might have.
And that's in the institutional and campus type environment.
Right.
For some of your large developers that have portfolios in diverse locations, they're starting to understand that they don't need an IT team that is going to be so distributed. And so they're going to the managed service providers and saying, okay, I need someone to build and maintain an OT network for me, and just buy it as a service.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Just sub it out, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So we've gone through how controls have changed. We've gone through the data revolution, when people getting all this data in, and you and I both remember a term called alarm fatigue, right? Where you got so much data, you guys are able to get the data into it, but now nobody knows what to do with the data, right? So I think that's probably an onion you guys are helping people peel back too. Talk about that now. You got the data in, and what do you do with it? How do you get about using it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with some of the advanced tools like FDD and things like that, you're able to help with the alarm fatigue. Because before some of the modern tools, people wanted to create an alarm for a lot of different things that are really informational. But to someone operating a building, an informational alarm is just noise. And an alarm, our motto is that an alarm requires you to get out of your seat. If it doesn't require you to get out of your seat, it's not really an alarm. It's just an alert.
Nice.
And if you have a platform that's giving you insight into how your building is operating, and that you can use as that tool to make improvements and make sure things aren't degrading, then you can limit your actual alarms to those important alarms that do become you have your training procedures and say, we have these alarms set at levels that if you get an alarm, you've got to go look at that you've got an issue.
Got you. Alarms are one form of data, and then we also got all kinds of other data, from temperature, humidity. How are people using that information now in terms of making their buildings more efficient, maybe, or increasing their customer occupant comfort and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think there's benchmarking and data validation. If people have certain expectations of temperature and humidities, that you're able to validate that you're getting those. But from an optimization standpoint, that's where there's so much opportunity right now, that we're able to see into systems like we never could before from an operational standpoint, really run a set of rules that's analogous to a commissioning team running a test, and run it real time on a daily basis. And with that type of information, you have a great ability to optimize your building and keep it that way, on the flip side, you got to have a staff that is going to take that data and make those changes, because sometimes that requires maintenance, sometimes it requires sequence improvements, sometimes it requires equipment replacement. What we can't do with technology is create that budget that has to be in place to get people to physically make changes and to update equipment that's reached failure.
We're gonna dive into the budgetary things here in just a second, but how far, Donnie, are we away from, in your opinion, where we're monitoring stuff? So now all of a sudden you've got a motor or an actuator or something, and all of a sudden, because we're monitoring it, we've got the data, we're bringing it in, we've got the algorithms, and all of a sudden it pops up and it goes, this motor is going to fail in approximately 2 weeks and 3 days, and it notifies the maintenance people. It sends a PO over to me so that I make sure I have the motor formed to install, and then virtually within a day, they're replacing that actuator before it actually fails. Or is that in the foreseeable future, in your opinion?
Yeah, maybe not quite as accurate as what day it's going to fail, like you just said, but
where they're going to get the part from.
That's right. But when you've got the ability to say that this, from a machine learning standpoint, this equipment has been running, consuming this kind of power historically, trend over trend, day over day, and now we're seeing this different value.
Yeah.
Now you know that there's extra resistance in there. There's something wrong. Someone needs to look at that. From an asset management standpoint, integrating that with asset management, it's there today to be able to say, I know here's the part number on this device. This is where I get it from. This is the next step down the line of fixing that. But you're still giving a probability that what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
And someone still has to look at it and validate that. And you can automate the point that all they have to do is click a button to roll the truck to fix that device.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people are today.
It's exciting, and it seems too with AI, artificial intelligence. I know there was a guy I interviewed a while back, a company called Ellipsa, and they basically have artificial intelligence templates, right, where you can pull the data out of a Niagara Jace, whatever template you want to do, whether it's predictive maintenance, whether it's reporting or whatever. It's just like it pulls it in and it makes the data accessible in whatever form you want it. And I know there are a lot of people that do that, but are you seeing more and more of your customers saying, hey, Donnie, how can we just make this turnkey? We got the data. What can we put on top of this so that we can get this information when we want it?
We're not quite seeing that yet because it's the operational model. In other words, what the people that are making the most use of those types of tools are more the service providers who are coming in as third-party operators and saying, let me use these advanced tools and operate your building more efficiently, and going into that model.
Gotcha.
There's not so many of the self-owner occupiers that are really asking that level of a question yet. Most of them are trying to scramble and maintain with what they have, and they'll listen to us and other consultants on guiding them towards preparing for the future, but they're not quite jumping out there and looking for the most advanced.
Well, it seems like money's getting a little tight these days. I think a lot of, with the interest rates going up, I think a lot of these big commercial real estate people are holding on for dear life, trying to get through the next balloon payment. But so you're seeing that too, things tightening up a little bit on the commercial
side. For sure, yeah. And what typically happens in this type of cycle is if people are building less, they're trying to maintain the value of the assets that they have. So they start getting more interested in, is this building running optimally? Can I save energy? Do the occupants in this building enjoy being here? Because I don't want them to leave at the end of their lease and then start moving to another building. So we're definitely starting to see that operational side in commercial real estate become more of a focus point again. But that being said, there's still a lot of construction going on out there.
Yeah.
Tons of data centers being constructed. Hospitals are being built like never before. So even though there may be a little bit of a downturn in corporate real estate, the building market is still going strong.
Nice. I know, Donnie, way back in the day when I had hair, you and I were accused of being like digital twins. But for our audience out there who might not know, let's talk just a minute about digital twins. I'd like to get your sort of take on it. Do you guys put stock in digital twins, and do you use them? And if so, how?
Sure. Yeah. The term digital twin is interesting because there's so many different products that have said that they are a digital twin, and they're all right. They are a type of a digital twin. So you've got your BIM model side of, I can put a lot of data in the BIM model and have a digital representation of my physical environment. No live data, just it's just an advanced BIM model. And other companies are taking that approach and saying, I can take that information and start to find my assets, keep track of assets, the information. You start to merge that live data into that type of environment. Then you start getting what we would consider more of a digital twin, that not only do I have this digital representation of my building, but now I have some information that tells me how it's performing. You're marrying that building automation data world to that BIM world. But the third part that we see as one of the most critical parts to actually be called a digital twin is the simulation side. In any other industry, when you look at a digital twin, you're able to simulate different environments and then say, okay, I like the performance of this. Let's now enact that. And so that's where we're starting to see some traction of being able to take simulation, whether it's getting data from your energy model or being able to do some predictive analytics within the twin, and then use that for informing you on decision making. Pulling all of that together, that the market's really not there yet, but we see some promising products that have built from one side or the other and are starting to bring those other features. And I think we're a few years away from a real digital twin market. And then you've got the Microsofts of the world that have built more of that data model of what does that look like under the engine if you have a digital twin. So that side of it is important as well. So all that's coming together for what looks to be a pretty interesting future.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I tell you what, it's like we got all this great stuff, and let's get back to the budget thing, because it obviously costs money. And in my opinion, probably in your opinion, when you invest in things like this, it's money well spent. But how are you seeing people sort of balance? Let me rephrase it. I was talking to Mark Peacock a while back, and I asked him from LinkSpring, and he said his advice to owners would be, don't wait for the technology to change before you invest in the technology. We've got the technology now to solve your problems. But because I know if they give you an unlimited budget, man, you could solve all the world's problems in terms of a building problem. They would be zero use buildings and everything else. But so how are people talking budget wise versus technology? Are they willing to invest? Are you seeing, are they holding back? And so, and what's your challenge with that?
Yeah, for any new construction project that we're doing, we're talking to our client about being, you could call it digital twin ready, AI ready. Is your data accessible? Are we putting things on the network? Are we getting it secured? You may not have an operational ROI for some of these applications today, but that price is coming down and that need is going up. You're going to be a responsible steward of what you're being asked to construct. Let's have you be ready. And so that's one side of it, that it really doesn't cost more to do it right. To just do it right the first time.
Okay.
So that's one side of it. The other side is the technology side. The costs are coming down. Every product that's being developed, people are looking at how to deploy it and make it less labor intensive. And for the digital twins, I don't need to create a 3D model of the building when the design team already did.
Yeah.
But if I can take that work that's already done and then start to add data to it, I don't need to create a new energy model. That was already created when the building was done. So when you can start to overlay these tools that you're using anyway and use them in a smarter way, then that's going to allow the adoption to speed up that much more. It's great to have a product that you can create a bunch of 3D graphics in, but if you have to do that for a building that probably doesn't even have proper as-built, you're a long labor way away from getting that technology deployed.
Yeah. So that's part of what you guys do, right? Is helping pros and cons. You could wait on this. Like you said, you mentioned, let's be ready for this. You don't need to do this now. Because you talk to some people, and we have over the years, they say before we really get the owners more savvy, we want lowest bid period into the story, and the engineers not understanding those trade-offs where they can advise the owners. Because if you think about it, you guys are like the building doctors, right? The owners are going, give me the lowest cost solution, which makes sense. But right. The lowest cost solution that is going to also get you from point A to point B, right? Do you see the way we bid buildings changing anytime soon, or have they already?
Yeah, I think they already have. I see pretty much at design development for almost every project, there are a group of contractors pricing that work before we've even started construction documents. And so that's very helpful, especially in today's market where you don't know from one day to the next what anything costs. And so all the historical data that we had pre-COVID is just out the window.
Forget about it.
And so, that integrated team, it may not be design build. It's more of a design assist model that you've got a contractor team that's pricing that and helping you make those decisions as you go forward.
Very cool. And it seems like we're getting a whole new level of, and I don't even know what the term is. We called it master systems integrator for a while, and I think there are different terms for it. But that controls contractor that's not just a controls contractor just pulling the wire, but that is taking responsibility for all the different systems and bringing them back. And tell me about that, if you will. And are you guys seeing that? And what do you look for when you're looking for somebody to see if they're qualified to do that?
Yeah, we really look at two different efforts independently. And if someone can do both, that's great. But we want to work with controls contractors that are network and IT savvy, that are good at programming and doing the graphics and all the things that it takes for a good control system. But then there's that data side of the application and the analytics and those kind of things. And if we can have one team that's really good at getting everything installed into the network, and another team that's really good at ingesting that and getting the platform built, that's great. If someone's capable of doing both, that's also great. But what's really important from a construction standpoint is that you have a good, robust team that can get that installation. A lot of the application work after that, it's remote work anyway.
Yeah.
And small, really sharp teams that can work from anywhere, that doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah. No, it seems like we're getting a lot more talented people that are coming in the industry that are really starting to get this down. So shift gears for a minute, because as I said at the beginning of the show, and I've said numerous times, getting a good consulting engineer on your team is probably the most important decision you can make. So for people out there, what if you were interviewing a consulting engineer to design a system for your building? Give me 3 or 4 questions you would ask and the answers you'd be looking to hear.
Yeah, I would want to know what your approach to designing controls is. Do you have a controls expert team, or do you have a really sharp mechanical team that just depends on feedback from the vendors?
Yeah.
That's how some teams operate. They don't have the staff to be able to go in and be controls experts. And we work on projects that we're brought in to be that expertise to do the controls, the Div 25, the how do I pull it all together, sometimes a holistic technology package, and work with an MEP that doesn't have that in-house expertise. Yeah, I would want to know that, and how they maintain staying up to date with the industry, what their impression is of IP controls, of BACnet SC, and for server side versus cloud, and all these different things. And if they're not able to answer any of those questions, say we're going to bring in this other team for these things, then we'll let you continue designing the mechanical system.
I think I wrote an article about it for Control Trends once about knowing whether you got a good consulting engineer. I think one of the things is ask them if they know who Donny Walker is. If they don't, or ask them if they've been to Realcomm. When was the last Realcomm IBCon they went to? Sure. That's a pretty good filter right there, because if they're spending the money to do that, and I know you're at every single one of those conferences as well as your team, that's a pretty good indicator that they're keeping up.
That's right.
Now, let's talk a little bit about Newcomb and Boyd now, because you guys, I love the fact that if there's other engineers out there and they don't have that controls expertise, maybe they got the mechanical, they could bring you guys in to do the control side for them. I think that's a really, really cool thing for people to be able to hear about. But talk about the services you guys provide.
Yeah, our team, obviously full MEP engineering, but I manage our groups that are, what we call our specialties. And so that's our intelligent buildings group. But also we have a really deep bench on our acoustical team. So we do the vibration and noise analysis. That's another service that we offer. Sometimes there's another MEP, but we're doing all the vibration and noise control and the architectural acoustics within performance spaces and stuff like that. We do the AV, the security. We do the experiential work that sometimes employee experience apps and those kind of things of how do I tie all these things together and make for a better experience. And we also have a team that does performance work in theaters, so the rigging and lighting and those types of things. And then back on the MEP side, we also have a deep bench on our commissioning team. So we do retro commissioning, we do new building commissioning, but mostly for large sophisticated spaces, so labs, hospitals, data centers, that type of work.
Very cool. And you guys, what sort of territory do you guys cover?
So our MEP team is pretty much Southeast. Okay. So we do a lot of work all over all the Southeast states. On the technology side, we've got folks from New York to San Francisco and down to Miami. We cover the U.S. It's more from a
I heard Elon Musk has commissioned you guys to design the buildings on Mars when he gets up there. Is that rumor?
I don't think so.
Nice. And people is newcombandboyd.com, Donnie? Is that the best way to get hold of you guys and engage you guys?
Yeah, newcomb-boyd.com.
Okay, cool. All right, final question for you, Donnie, man. I know you keeping up with things. Where do you see the controls industry being in, we should say, the next 5 years or so? How's it going to be different, or is it just going to be the same, just better?
No, I do think it's going to be different. I think with more IP controls, it changes the installation model to a lot more of a parts and smarts kind of model. You don't have to spend as much time hanging wire in the field and connecting this and that to each other. If you're buying equipment, a lot of times you're getting your controls factory mounted. You've got a structured cabling company that's running your data drop to the point that your controls team can start to really focus on building out those shop drawings, building out the programming, and then getting all of that functional at the end and not having to spend as much time on site, which is going to be good for a company that is limited on talent anyway. And a lot of that hanging and installation work is not a great use of the talent that they have. So I see a shift in that labor of who's doing a lot of the installation versus who's doing the programming and that type of work. And hopefully what that can help us do is to be more efficient and get those better controls on the project without an exorbitant amount of cost.
That's Donny Walker, Department Newcomb and Boyd. That's Newcomb-Boyd.com. Man, check those guys out. They're great. Donnie's one of the all-time great guys in our industry. As a matter of fact, I think, is that a Control Trends Award I see behind you, Donnie? Let's show our audience what those things look like. For some of the younger people in the industry, man, you want to get one of those one day if we ever do it again. But Donnie, man, thank you so much for sharing, and we'd love to get you on in another 6 months or so. Let's keep up. And till Max, I want to see some of the pictures he's snapping.
That sounds great. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Donny Walker. Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye. Okay, there you go. That's another week on Control Talk Now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Special thanks to our guest this week, Donny Walker. Hey, if you like the show, share it with a friend. But until next week, remember, be bold, stay in control, stay relevant. Sonner Thompson used to say, buy the ticket, take the ride. And as Kenny Smyers used to say, indeed. We'll see you next week. Bye.